I'd rather create something that others criticise than create nothing and criticise others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Hannah Keirl gets abstract with us today on cultural differences and philosophy. We make some comments on the human condition, the way that language affects business, and what Hannah means when she says, monkey see, monkey do. It's not what you think. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the show, Hannah.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to getting into a very interesting conversation today. But my first question, before we unfold a lot more about what you do, is I'd like to know if you have a crazy hospitality story.
Well, I'm sure we all have many from years and years behind the stick. But I think it's always the simple ones that kind of stick in your mind. So there was one day we were making a whole bunch of tiki cocktails, zombies, and we just served them up and garnished them. And the lady that we were serving them to thought it was the tip jar for some reason and decided to put a $5 note in her own zombie.
That's quite filthy too. People don't know where notes have been until they've worked in a bar.
Yeah, it's delicious, right?
Because, and I read some research on this, that if someone, so obviously this is in the lavatory, the gentleman's lavatory, if someone drops a gold coin, they are very likely to pick it up. If it's silver, if it's the shrapnel, they won't worry. But I have heard that if it's a gold coin, this is a likely occurrence. Be thinking about that next time you touch a gold coin. But that's cool. You're welcome at home. Hannah, I want to ask you a little bit more about why you do what you do and what really inspires you.
Well, I think I'm inspired by quality, by creativity, and by people. I've been very lucky. I get to travel a lot with the different kind of jobs I've had over the years, and I love that I get to see different cultures. I learn about different cuisines. I love that, you experience hospitality in so many different ways, and it really is what makes this industry so fabulous.
So the three things were, could you please repeat them again?
Quality, creativity, and people, or hospitality that comes with people, getting to know people.
Awesome. Are they three things that you look for when you're, say, hiring people as well?
100%. I mean, it's an age-old industry adage, isn't it? But you hire on attitude and not skill set, because you can teach the skills, but you can't hire the personality. When you are hiring someone, these are the facets that you look for. Someone who's got a great attitude, who's really open-minded and willing to learn and wants to really grow and experience new things. I think it's really important.
It's interesting that you say that, because from what I remember, they're the reasons that you were hired at a bar job that I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about.
I was very, very lucky when I was quite young, 18. I was hired to be part of the original team at 1806 down in Melbourne. The fabulous Sebastian Rayburn, who is an absolute powerhouse of a human. I decided that I wanted to make cocktails because as a teenager, I'd been the kind of bartender at all of my friends' 16th and 18th birthday parties. Fruit tingle being, I think, my first cocktail, very classy. I decided I wanted to do more of it and learn more about it and be more in depth with it. And so I wrote Sebastian a cover letter saying how much I was, I didn't know much or anything at all, but I was really passionate. I was really interested in learning more about cocktails and the history and techniques, etc. And he offered me a job, much to probably mine and everyone else's surprise at the time. But I promptly moved down to Melbourne because I was based in Sydney at the time, and transferred my university degree down to Melbourne as well. And the rest was history, as they say. I was there for almost 3 years.
That's obviously quite a move for a job, and for those who might not be in nightlife, it is a very, very well-regarded bar in Australia. Your bartending experience began before that. How did it actually begin? And tell us a bit about that journey into hospitality.
It goes back to me loving travel, to be perfectly honest. My mum took my brother and I backpacking across South America when I was 13. I was very, very young. And I didn't want to come home. I just fell in love with South America. When I came home, Mum said to me, well, if you want to go, I can't afford to take you, so you're going to have to get a job like everyone else. Unbeknownst to her, the stubborn Serbian woman in me said, right, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I started working at a cafe aged 13, got a second job by the time I was 14 at good old Coles supermarket.
Yes, checkout chick.
I wasn't. I was a presentation, which was basically pulling forward all of the stuff on the shelves to make it look pretty. I couldn't do checkout chick because I was too young. You had to be 16 to handle cash.
Ah.
There you go. Fun fact about supermarkets. But I also got my first kind of official bar gig at the local nightclub pub that I may not have been going to previously to turning 18. Started pulling pints there. I think the first cocktail that we had there was Bundy and Coke on tap. Very classy.
Yes, classy indeed.
Yeah, and then travelled a bit and did some work in bars and clubs when I travelled through my gap year. And then 1806 came along and I just absolutely loved it. I mean, I loved working in that bar. The team were phenomenal. Everyone was so incredibly supportive. We used to have Sunday study sessions of, a couple of hours every Sunday where not just the 1806 team, but all Melbourne kind of bar crews at the time would get together and nerd out on booze and booze history and have these little prep sessions that were absolutely so much fun and great community to kind of grow up in, so to speak, when it comes to bars and Melbourne hospitality.
And you mentioned that you have Serbian heritage as well. Can you tell us about maybe your heritage and how that influences your perspective?
My mom's family is Serbian, my dad's English, and we grew up very much with my mom's side of the family, north of Sydney. And the way we grew up was that everyone was always welcome. There was always a coffee to be had. Someone would pop in for 5 minutes and there was a plate of food put out on the table. You'd have an occasion, your Slava or a Christmas, and we celebrate Orthodox. So it was always a couple of weeks after kind of your regular Christmas or New Year's events or Easter, etc. All of our friends were welcome. The second cousins were all welcome. You'd have family and friends from the Serbian community come over. And sometimes at like Christmas or Easter, you'd have 40 odd people sitting around the table eating and drinking. But it didn't matter whether you liked the person or not. You can't like everyone. We all know that. But there was definitely people that weren't your favorite, but you always made them feel welcome no matter what. I think growing up in that kind of culture and then moving into hospitality, it's a very kind of natural transition because you already have that, innately within you just because you've, nature nurture, right? You didn't know anybody your whole life. That's just how it was. Between that and travel and I love traveling through different cultures and learning about their different styles of hospitality as well. It's very much a passion of mine.
And on your travels, you've learned a few different languages. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. It's through travel, through work. Actually, in the school, we studied Japanese all through high school. Yes, our biggest trading partner through the 80s and 90s, late 80s, 90s. So we studied Japanese at school, Serbian at home, and then Spanish, which initially my Spanish was Donde está la fiesta, or where's the party, which is very much backpackers Spanish, but moved into more formal Spanish throughout university as well and lived in Spain for a while, which was incredible, an absolute incredible experience.
Let's fast forward a little bit. We've jumped around a little bit about your background and heritage. Tell us about what you do now.
Now, well, my current project, I shouldn't say project, it's a business. It's running. I am currently based in Shanghai, China. So currently we have Spirit Spots and we import, distribute and run brand management for Australian craft spirits here. It's a whole lot of fun putting Australia on the map when it comes to booze. And we do a lot of our work here through cocktails because cocktails have just kind of become the thing here in China in the last few years. So it's a great platform which to bounce these brands off. So we're working at the moment primarily with the West Winds and the Grove, both out of Margaret River, and singing brand Australia to mainland China, which is really, really cool.
And I imagine that is a little bit more difficult, and even though you know many different languages. Mandarin isn't one of them.
It is not. I get by with a little bit of Japanese here and there, and I can read some of the characters, but it's a completely different culture and a different way of doing things. The language is one hurdle, but you also have so many other facets to consider here. So you have things like saving face and maintaining guanxi or relationships. Well, they are standard in all business, but here it's so much emphasis is put on guanxi and saving face. And so you really need to make sure that you're kind of doing favors for people before they ask you to do favors for them, to build and maintain those relationships. But it's very much still quite transactional in that you do that and then someone will owe you and someone will come back and help you when you need it as well. And if they don't know the right person to help you, they'll find them, etc. So it's a really fascinating place to do business and to be learning the Chinese culture in this way as well, so hands-on. There are just an inordinate amount of hurdles and things that happen here, and you think, now how did we get here, and was this the best choice? Was this the best decision? And what do I need to do next? And things change at the drop of a hat. Laws here will change overnight or be enforced overnight without any notice at all, and you suddenly have to adjust your entire kind of business model or structure basis a new law. You have to be very, very flexible.
Last time when we spoke, we discussed, we opened up that concept. I was particularly fascinated by it and had noticed that it's also been more of a trend in Western culture around building that relationship first, or I was questioning whether it was just my own knowledge expanding and realizing that it was just a superior way to sell. What do you think is the real difference between the cultures, or if there is a difference?
I think there is a difference, but I think it's a very nuanced difference. One that personally I don't think I'm kind of qualified yet to kind of answer with any real clarity because I'm still learning so much about it myself. I do think that at home and in Western cultures, there's much more of a tendency to, as you've said, work on building the relationship to create the foundation for sales. I think that's always kind of been the case here in its own way, but it is very, very nuanced. This whole saving face and the relationship stuff in China is quite a fine line to walk down, and you've got to be so careful you don't offend someone with what you say or even how you present something to a client. And it is changing slowly. It's kind of, I guess, we're meeting more in the middle is perhaps the best phrase for it. That's, again, a lot of business people in China have now spent time abroad or gone to university abroad and brought some of those values back with them as well. You've got a lot of anti-corruption laws here that are also changing the way things like gifting work. It won't change completely for a long time, I don't think, but they're just other kind of factors you need to consider in what you're building on a daily basis here.
Does that mean that you think that international business will eventually limit out to a generalized sort of system?
There'll always be differences, but I think it will become more, I guess, homogenous, but simply because it has to. When you are operating across cultures and across languages, I think the way we do business in China as foreigners is different to the way the Chinese do business with each other as well. There's more of an understanding that, well, you are a Westerner, so you have different values to me. Therefore, either you have to adjust to my way of doing it or I'll meet you in the middle as the two kind of things I come up against. Long term, we do find more and more kind of meeting in the middle for this and bringing it together to create more of an ease of doing business, for lack of a better phrase.
Another thing that we jumped into last time, and this is something that I'm super passionate about and realised that you were too, was about just the sheer fact that we love to observe human behaviour. And that hospitality is a prime environment to be doing that. You shared a story with me, if you'd like to share it with our listeners, about a bar you were in with a friend and you were bored on was it a Tuesday night?
It's actually a Wednesday night, and it was a friend and colleague of mine at the time. We were both, while we were still at university, and it was rent week, basically. We're both of the same mentality of what I call in my trainings now monkey see, monkey do. And the way very simple. It's the energy that you put out, your customers and your clients will tend to reciprocate that back to you. And, the more energy you have and the more enthusiastic you are, the more fun your customers will have, but they'll also get that back to you, if that makes sense. And so one night we had both just had to pay rent and bills, etc. And we were quite broke. So we decided that, right, tonight we're going to really pull the energy out and we're going to give everyone the best experience they've ever had here. And this was in our 1806 days, actually. We made $300 in tips that night because every single guest had the absolute best time. And it was a case of just showcasing great drinks, great service, great attitude, making sure everyone was having a laugh. And we had a full bar until 3 a.m. Just the two of us, no one else. Everything. We were the bar back, we were the chef, we were the bartender, you name it, we did it. But we had the best time and we walked away with an extra $300 in tips, well, $150 each, basically. What a way of doing it, and honestly.
It's all about your mentality and staying resilient and focused on the objective at hand. And in the end, we win.
Yep, 100%.
Hannah, my next question for you is, what are you learning about or exploring at the moment?
Professionally, it's about learning about China for me. It's really important to get into the mindset of how people think here and what sells and what works and what doesn't. Technology in China moves so goddamn fast, it's unbelievable. And trying to just keep up with all of these facets and then how we can implement them or use them in both hospitality and in spirit sales is just an ongoing learning curve for me professionally. Personally, it's just how can I travel more?
Yeah.
Does that count? Am I allowed to say that?
Well, I'll open that up by asking what it is about travel that's really helping you.
I love that I get to meet new people and learn about different cultures and different experiences, and whether it's historically what has happened in countries or to a community is fascinating, but also then looking at the ways different cultures show hospitality is a huge interest of mine. For me, it's not just about going to like a beach and drinking badly made pina coladas. It's more about, learning facets of culture. So in China, I really like going to different places that have different types of tea, and they have so many different ways of making tea, or baijiu, and everyone says, oh, there's no good baijiu, but there are some really, really delicious baijius out there. But it's about taking the time to go and explore that and learn about it. I think the same goes for when I lived in India. It used to be hospitality is obviously massive in India. They're a very hospitable culture. But then, you have different types of chai or tea from all around the country. And obviously the food from north to south, east to west is so different, in part because it's a big country again, and climate north, south, east, west is really different.
What innovations or innovative techniques have you seen in the industry in the time you've been in it?
So many things. I mean, when I started, the trend was very, very much like really classic cocktails. There was very much let's focus on, I think especially like the 1920s, 1930s style of drinks. There was the mentality of let's understand the history of the drinks and how they're made and why they were made a certain way, etc. I think you've got everything from bottled cocktails and cocktails on tap now, but also there's so much more use of techniques that I guess were considered chef techniques. So using sous vide for things, etc., that make so much sense now that we think about it and now that we experiment with it in terms of infusing flavors, etc. I also think in China it's really interesting. You get to see technology put into cocktails, whether it's creating, like there's a bar here at the moment that they're printed on menus, and as you add heat, it shows the drink. And they also use technology in the sense of, you can scan a QR code, because everything here, QR codes never really took off at home, but here everything's a QR code. So there are bars here where you scan the QR code and you get an interactive video about how the cocktail's made and what's inspired by it, There are some bars that are integrating VR and AR into their cocktail experiences, which is, whole next level.
How are they doing that?
So basically, you get the drink in front of you. Again, you scan the QR code and you get a link and you get your glasses and you're taken on a journey. So you kind of feel like you're in a field, for example. There was one that did a cocktail that was chamomile tea gin martini, and in the AR you go through the fields, and it's like you're walking through the fields, and you have the chamomile growing, and you have daisies, and you can't feel the wind, but you can see the wind in the grass. Does that make sense? So it makes you feel like you're all of a sudden not sitting in a bar in the middle of a city of 15 million people or 30 million people, but you're in a field enjoying a cocktail somehow.
What changes do you want to see take place in the industry?
Ooh, I would like to see it more and more about hospitality. I know that sounds silly, but as we become so engrossed in our skill set and the technical side of it, it seems that we kind of also take a step back from just having a good time in a bar. And I think that also comes back to monkey see, monkey do. I mean, I have a pet peeve of like seeing people in bars on their mobile phones. And again, something you see a lot more in Asia do at home, but it drives me nuts. But also then you'll see, the second you see 2 or 3 people behind a bar on a phone, everyone else in the bar seems to be on their phone. And to me, there's no joy in going to a bar to sit on my phone. If I wanted to do that, I'd make a drink for myself at home. As much as we get all excited about all these innovations, I really hope to see that we'll see more and more engagement just with guests in the future, like more focus on hospitality and the experience.
What are you doing to make that a reality?
Well, it's a bit hard. It's harder when you're not in the bar every day anymore, but we've always done a lot of training, both in India and now in China. We do a lot of training on consumer and guest engagement in bars. But I think that comes down to it's not the easiest thing to teach.
I guess you're resisting attitude and some sort of sociological change as well, which is 2 very difficult things to change. So, but I think, we're talking about very difficult concepts to overcome, and no one really has an answer. These are questions that all sorts of industries are discussing. So I just sort of want to know your perspective on it.
It's kind of comes down to that concept of how social is social media. I mean, it's actually quite antisocial, really, isn't it? When we look at it, the more and more we use technology, it seems the less and less connected we are, even though it's created for that very purpose. Again, this is one of the things I love about bars, though, is bars have been around for centuries, right? I mean, they've always been the place that people go to be social, to spend time with other humans, and to have an experience, to have a conversation, to have a debate even. When I walk into a bar and I see 70% of the guests there on their phone, my immediate reaction is actually to want to walk out, and you can't control that per se. It's just that I love the idea of going to a bar to meet new people, or to have a catch up with some friends, or a great drink is absolutely part of the experience.
Yeah, and if they're all plugged in, then you can't meet anyone.
You can't, and again, like I said, I think of bars as a place to kind of build connections and to talk to people, not just to sit and talk about or take a photograph of my food and my cocktail just so that I can put it on my Instagram and my Facebook and my WeChat and whatever else. I mean, it's great to do that, but it's not the reason that I'm there, which seems to be changing. I think the reason I'm quite passionate about this is also because in China, there's a whole population, or a whole demographic rather, that is, I guess, the millennial generation, and they literally go to places simply to take a photo to show their friends that they've been and they've had that particular dish or that particular drink. You'll get guests walk into a bar here and not even look at a menu, and not even look whether or not it's a drink that they may or may not enjoy, but simply show a photo and say, I want to have this drink, whatever it is. They don't know what's in it. They may hate everything that's in it, but they don't care. They just want to have the photo.
Yeah, it's definitely a movement internationally, and I wonder how much more prevalent it is in Eastern culture, and particularly, the conversation we're having is obviously about mainland China, which I'm not as clued up on as you are, obviously living there. You know, where are things heading? We've got on-demand food, and there's all sorts of these, very, very challenging issues for us to deal with.
And I mean, on demand here is really, I thought living in India, things were pretty on demand then, but it really is next level here. I mean, I can order dumplings to my office. It'll cost me $3, including delivery, for 24 dumplings, and it'll arrive within 20 minutes. It's just so much a part of everyday life in a lot of China, not just Shanghai. I mean, the biggest cities have the fastest services, obviously, but everything is fast and it's moving quicker every day.
So then, where are people going to hang out one day? You know, when they can just order food and drinks at home, and if they go out, people are plugged into their phones too, and you know, it's also an antisocial environment.
Which is such a shame, firstly. But I mean, you know, if someone said to me that in 25 years, everyone's just going to be sitting around with like VR or AR goggles or whichever ones, and it's like you're all sitting in the same room having a conversation, but you're all in 20 different places, I genuinely wouldn't be shocked anymore.
Yeah, I think that'll be a reality. Yeah.
There's a theme park that has just been built in a place called Guiyang, which is in Western China. It's one of the poorer provinces. And it is a virtual reality theme park that is 3 times the size of Shanghai Disneyland. And it is just virtual reality.
That is crazy. Have you been?
No, it's only just opened. So I do want to go because apparently there is a 30-meter transformer out the front.
That sounds crazy.
You walk in and people are just walking around with VR goggles and they're all in different places. I can't really fathom it, to be honest. I really think it's one of those things I need to just go and see and just be like, I'm standing in a virtual reality minefield of however many hectares this is. It's ridiculous.
My next question for you, Hannah, is what is your creative process? What steps do you take to make your ideas a reality?
I guess it depends on what I'm doing. I mean, when it comes to making drinks or a menu, for example, I'm very much about creating balance, not just in a cocktail, but on a menu as well. I love cooking, I think is probably the best way of putting it. I love cooking. I love experimenting with food, and that obviously goes really easily into making drinks. So when I'm wanting to do like a seasonal drinks menu, there's nothing I love more than just going to a fresh food market and just walking around and seeing what is fresh, what is inspiring, what is different, something that's a bit unique, and then look at how I can pair those with different spirits and different flavors. It depends on obviously if I'm in a bar, it's easier. If I'm doing event stuff, then it has to be scalable. But I really think it's the ingredients themselves that can be the most inspiring.
So do you just then get inspiration from something that you see? Or what I want to try to pull out there is more about how do you get into a creative state to let those ideas come in?
Well, you can't be stressed. That's number one. I'm terrible at doing anything creative when I'm stressed out. So I tend to find that I am most creative on Sundays, which is my day off. Honestly, it's going to sound so silly, but I just like to do something outdoors generally. And if I'm outdoors and I'm wandering and I relax, and then I can start thinking about events or about concepts that I want to create, etc. And then it just kind of starts to flow. I mean, one thing leads to another. I think ideas tend to generate more ideas rather than less. At least they do for me. We're doing our launch event in June, and it comes from kind of 2 or 3 memories that I have that I've kind of put together to create this launch party that we're doing. But in doing so, it's also about kind of thinking about what you like and what you would want to see. I mean, obviously not every drink you make for yourself, but I do think that if you wouldn't drink it, there's no point in putting it on a menu either. So it may not be your favorite, but you've got to balance everything out, right?
I've thought about that myself with the outdoors, and I think because a lot of people draw inspiration when they're just going for a walk or hiking or just simply outside. And I have this idea that it comes from a philosophical discussion between beauty and sublimity. It comes from feeling this sublime feeling So there's this discussion around whether something is beautiful or sublime, and beauty is really the concept that we understand it to be as something is beautiful. But sublimity is more around this feeling of just being so small compared to something else that you're observing. So if you were standing at the Grand Canyon, then you would be looking out and feeling a sublime feeling, almost this sense of terror, this feeling of terror that you're so small and insignificant. If you stand next to a huge building, or next to, in nature, next to trees or mountainous terrain, these sorts of things. These are things I'm looking at exploring in a different show, in a separate show on my own, through my own channel. But to crack on, I'd like to know if you had a mentor along your journey.
Yes, I've definitely had mentors. I've had more than one mentor, actually, I would say. Sebastian Rayburn, 100%, not just because he kind of gave me my first leg into this industry that I do genuinely love so much, but because he's always been a fantastic champion of all young, enthusiastic bartenders and bar industry professionals. And he's forever, even 10 years later now, I know that I could still call him up any day, time, and he would happily sit and have a chat. I think that's fantastic to feel like you always have that support is really, really important, no matter what you do, especially I think when you're an entrepreneur and you're doing different projects, it's really important to have someone to kind of touch base with and talk to.
What's your biggest challenge right now?
My biggest challenge right now, there are several. If not the biggest, one of the biggest is supporting growth in China. It's a huge market. To be able to strategically scale a business here is a massive, massive challenge. One that we're working on day by day, but 100% that's a huge challenge. As is teaching people about craft spirits or handcrafted booze, because up until now, in the last kind of couple of years, the brands here have been dominated by your big companies, Bacardi, Diageo, Pernod. They basically own the market here, and yet all of this and imported spirits in China only accounts for 2.9% of spirit sales in China, which is crazy small. Majority of that is big companies. But providing a platform that both consumers and trade can come to through Spirits Box is proving to be a great help, because it gives them the education with the sales platform at the same time. And we're finding that, very small cities of 8 or 10 million that are considered fourth tier cities are screaming for some interesting and quality spirits options. So it's figuring out how to tap into those consumers, as well as making sure everything's scalable, is the biggest factor.
My last question for you today, Hannah, is what is the next step for Hannah Keirl?
Making Spirits Box a multi-million-dollar company. Does that count?
Awesome.
Dream big, right? Dream big.
Yes.
The next step is really pushing forward and focusing on Spirits Box. I'm really proud of what we've kind of established and achieved so far, because China is not an easy market to build into. And I'm also really proud that we can support homegrown brands. I'm very much Team Australia, Brand Australia. I think it's like working in a small bar team, right? You have each other's backs, and that's how I see it, bringing it to the China and to the Chinese. Very much so. Yeah,
I love it. Well, it's been amazing having you on the show today, Hannah, and I'm always looking forward to having a chat with you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Stay in touch with the show after hours at Hospopreneurs on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Creativity and innovation in hospitality. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Do you want a great podcast? Sweet As Sound is here to help. We'll give you the tools to do it yourself. All you have to do is press that record button. Sweet As Sound. Just hit record.